Okay, everyone, we are live on the Evangelicalish podcast and really excited about this conversation today. It may be a little bit different than where we normally go, but we have Bishop James Long with us today, who is, gosh, I had your title right in front of me just a second ago, presiding Archbishop for the United States Old Catholic Church. Has been doing this for a long, long time. I thought this was interesting. You have a 110-page document attesting to your apostolic succession, all kinds of master's degrees and associate degrees, and you deal with the paranormal, which I think would be sort of exorcism and things, and have nearly 700,000 followers on TikTok. At least as of today, you do. We don't know if we will. Bishop James Long, welcome to Evangelicalish.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
It's kind of, I'm kind of laughing to have you on here because I remember we had a Catholic priest when I was in fourth grade. He lived right across the street, and he would mow his lawn with his, sort of priest pants on. I don't know what those are called, but no shirt, but his collar. And he would be drinking a beer, and my mom was just, so sad that that priest was going to hell. So do we each think the other is going to hell for not being the right kind of Christian at this point?
The only type of Christian that I'm concerned about is one who shows empathy, compassion, and love.
Well, speaking of empathy, compassion, and love, another bishop from the Episcopalian Church spoke in front of Donald Trump the other day, and he lost his you-know-what over it. What thoughts did you have on that whole thing? That was crazy.
There's a couple things. As a communicator, so I want to separate. First of all, she's the bishop.
Yeah.
She can say whatever she wants to. It's a pulpit. I mean, he is a guest at her church. So she is the shepherd. So she has the right to say whatever she wants as the bishop. As long as it's not heretical. But as a communicator, I look at it from a theological perspective and from a secular perspective. From a theological perspective, she had every right to say what she wanted, that she was in the pulpit, she was teaching. That's her right. She's a bishop. But as a communicator, I would ask, well, what is the goal? Is the goal to kind of get Donald Trump to think about, the trans rights? If that is the case, then as a communicator, I studied communication at Loyola University and how we effectively communicate with one another. The problem is from a secular perspective, if her goal is to get him to think about what she is saying, one thing you don't ever want to do with somebody like Donald Trump or anybody who has a large ego is to embarrass them, because then they will never listen to you. It's automatically their message is done. They're going to demonize you. So from a communicator, secular perspective, if my goal is to appease this person, fluff up their ego so then I can have a private audience. Martin Luther King was brilliant in this, brilliant. And if I could, because sometimes that's what you have to do, because if you're, as you're saying, you're going to get more honey with bees than you are with vinegar. And so I think that's what you have to do sometimes with people who have such huge egos. You can't put them on the spot. You can't embarrass them. You have to fluff their ego, have a beautiful service. And he says, oh, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. Then hey, can I call you, or can we have a meeting? Sure, come on in. Then have a conversation with him privately. Because you're going to get far, I think, if you're going to get anywhere, you're going to get it much further by doing that than by embarrassing. By embarrassing, now you're a demon. And he's going to demonize. So I separate them. I separate from a theological perspective to a secular perspective. And that's how I look at it.
It's such an interesting perspective, and I love that. And my wife and I talk about this a lot because she has served as an elected official. She's a bridge builder. That's what she does. And I'm more of the maybe John the Baptist type that goes in and says, you're wrong,
I respect it.
And I do, I see that, John the Baptist, we sort of say, wasn't it great that he went in front of Herod and said, what you're doing is wrong? But then he lost his head, and we never saw Jesus go in front of Herod and do that. So I guess you could say maybe that wasn't John's best idea. So, but I also never saw Jesus go to like Caiaphas and say, you're really cool, Caiaphas. You do a lot of good things
Yeah, that's
because
right.
I want to have a time
Right.
alone with you to try to talk you out of your terrible beliefs.
But again, you gotta look at the goal. What is the end goal? If it's to humiliate, successful. If the end goal is to get him to think about a different perspective, failed. And see, that's what from a communicator secular perspective, I would look at it from two different angles. So
Yeah.
how can I present myself as a bishop that he doesn't feel threatened by? Number one, because she's female, and many patriarchal. So that's number one. To kind of let him know he's not threatened. He doesn't need to feel threatened, and then move right into the private of having a conversation and getting his audience and get the audience with him. See, that's why I separate the two, and you know.
And I totally get where you're coming from. There is also, I think, the space for calling out truth to power for a broader audience. Maybe she's like, Trump's not going to be able to hear this, but maybe some people around him will, and maybe we have some Nicodemuses who will hear truth
Possibly.
and be drawn to it. I don't know.
Possibly, yeah. It's like people have asked me a lot about that, and I've thought of my first instinct was because as a communicator, my first instinct was, "Dang, you missed the boat." That was my first instinct because I guess it's because I had different perhaps motives than she did. My motive would be to get my foot in the door in the White House to have a private meeting with him, to share the logic with it, so that he's not embarrassed. Rather than embarrassing, and that door is shut now. That door is not going to open. It's closed. It is sealed. It is locked with 15 million different padlocks. You ain't got to open that door. You see what I mean? So it's kind of like I look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I'm worried that door is closed to any
Fair
common
enough.
sense or mercy talk whatsoever. Anyway, but
Fair enough.
do really. That's a really interesting perspective, and I appreciate that a lot. And Bishop is with us today to talk about something he does on TikTok. And why don't we show an example of what you do? And I'm really interested to hear more about this. And I even told you I'm a little bit skeptical about it all. But
Sure.
Bishop Long deals, sorry, I got to look around my camera here, in the paranormal. And here's a video of him doing a duet on TikTok of a paranormal appearance in somebody's place of residence.
Watch the pets. In just a moment, I'm going to show you a video submitted from one of my followers. You're going to see a hallway on the left side of the screen, and that's where I want you to pay close attention. Watch that hallway.
I just want to make sure, can you hear that okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
I believe sometimes it's just better not knowing. You'll see stuff.
He's a first
in your
responder.
house that maybe you
We
wish
salute
that
our
you
first
hadn't seen.
responders.
Check this out.
Wow, that really is impressive, isn't it? So what you see, when you zoom in closer, you can actually see a shadow, a dark shadow that crosses.
Is your house haunted? Do you have any kind of paranormal?
So do you believe that is a demonic presence in that house?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. But possibly.
Well, it certainly is possible. But see, I've been in the paranormal. First time I investigated the paranormal was 35 years ago. And that was at Waverly Hills in Louisville, Kentucky. And we were allowed to go up there. Waverly Hills was this massive, gigantic, old tuberculosis building. And it was abandoned. The owner didn't care. So I went up there when I was a teenager with a kid. And boy, we had
so this was before your time as a priest.
Oh, yeah. This was when I was like, yeah.
In your bio, you said you wanted to be a priest since you were 5 years old.
Yep, I knew. Yep, because I remember being in kindergarten, and our teacher asked us on Friday what we wanted to do, and I told her. And then I was going to mass, and then my mom asked me, "Well, what did you do on Friday?" Because she was in the medical field, and she was busy. And so we were going to the church. I said, "I want to do what he does," and I remember that like it was yesterday. And so my calling to the priesthood has never ever faded, ever. It's only increased. So,
and so out of that, you're walking through life, and then you get this chance as a teenager to go to this building, this abandoned building.
Yep. This abandoned building. And Waverly Hills is notorious. I mean, it's world renowned. And so we went down to the basement area, and there was paper everywhere and file cabinet, everything. And there was an old rusty chair that was on his side. And I tried to move the wheel. You couldn't even move the wheel. And we heard a little, like, it sounded like a child crying. But it was coming from upstairs. And we thought, well, that's kind of close. It's so big, it's easy to get lost there. So we thought, okay, we got to go find out what's going on here because help this kid. So we walked up these stairs, and it's the hallway's echo. And it was down way down the hallway. And so I got closer and closer to where the restroom was. And these were these old metal stalls. There was 3 of them. And we heard a child crying. It was like, where are you? We're trying to help you. So we opened one stall, nothing. We opened the second stall, nothing. And obviously the third stall, we thought maybe they just got locked in the stall. So I tried to open it and I could not. Now, so I'm trying to open it, and it was like someone took a sledgehammer and hit the stall so badly, the entire stall shook. I mean, it shook violently. We ran so fast. I don't think we touched the step. When we jumped down those steps, and when we got down to the bottom, that rusty wheelchair, that wheel was spinning. And I was like, nope. So, but the thing with so I've always loved the paranormal, but what I do is not so much paranormal, it's theological. Because
you're not a ghost hunter necessarily.
No, I don't go around cemeteries and ghost hunting and things of this nature. And I don't even like the term ghost hunting. It's like, what are you hunting? What do you mean? It's kind of, that in itself seems strange. But so what I deal with is theological. I deal with people who are legitimately terrified, who cannot get help from their clergy. And so then I don't get involved until it's real. Well, we can go further. I can explain longer, but we might be getting ahead of myself. But
okay.
So
yeah. I mean, that's what I'm looking for is
okay.
How did you get into this as a priest?
Sure.
And I'm really interested, but yeah, maybe we start there, and then I'm interested in metaphysically what is happening there. Like maybe let's start there. Like this baby cry, is that something demonic, you think? Is that truly a baby that spirit is still residing in our world, or what does that look like to you? So
I began reading books on demonology when I was 9. And I was one of those kids that was the nerd that loved staying at the local the parish library, or not the parish library, the neighborhood library. And every time after school, that's where I went. And I would read books on demonology. And a lot of times I didn't understand what I was reading, but I just couldn't put them down. It became an obsession. And so I read extensively, and that continued. So when I studied for the Roman Catholic priesthood, I had obviously a plethora of beautiful, amazing, obviously resources to just absorb, and even clergy that I knew that were exorcists that I was able to speak to and kind of mentor with, and that zeal just kind of continued. So when I went, so I took 6 years, and I received my minor orders in the Roman seminary, and then I decided my last year in the seminary, I just had this calling from God to look at the old Catholics. It's like, what is the old Catholics? My life was planned. I was going to be a Roman Catholic priest. I was going to have a parish. Life was going to be good. Everything was great. And then God disrupted my plans and said, I need you over here. Well, over there, the church doesn't offer a stipend. Over there, there's no paycheck. There's no church community. You have to support your own ministry with your own money, and there is no retirement. So why are you calling me over here? And so I said, okay. I took a year. I prayed about it. My spiritual director said, you need to do this if God is calling you. And because this was over 20 years, there was no books on how do you become an old Catholic clergy. There were no books on this. So I said, okay, God, 25 years ago. I said, okay. And so I followed. And so
Old Catholic is different than Roman Catholic.
Right. Yeah. Old Catholic actually technically started in 1870 over papal infallibility over the church in Utrecht. So Pope Leo the 13th gave the church in Utrecht complete autonomy because they couldn't come back and forth to ordain bishops. And so the church in the Netherlands became very wealthy, very, very wealthy. And then Rome said, okay, now we want your money and we want all your property. And the church said, no, this is the belongs to the people. We have autonomy. And then they declared them heretics. And then the Pope declared himself infallible. And that's when the church said, that's it. We're done. So with that community. So when I was ordained, I knew I wanted to help people, but I wanted to remain private because I actually am an extreme INFJ. I am not an extrovert at all.
Okay.
So for me, I wanted to be quiet, to remain quiet and do it behind the scenes. But when I went public, there was no Catholic clergy helping the paranormal community. There was none. And my friends who've been in the paranormal for years, said, we need your help. So then I went public, and then all the television shows start calling, the networks, the National Geographic, travel channels. What in the heck is going on here? Because it was so, it's just not what I wanted. Just wanted to be left alone and do. And so because the demand was so great from people who asked for help, I created a network, paranormal teams from all around the world, so that if someone calls in California or New York or Texas, I can call that team and say, look, you guys don't think everything's a demon. You guys are professionals. Please go out, investigate, and then tell me what you find. And then once they present all the evidence, if there's something there, I don't charge. So I never charge for going to people's home. I fund it with my own money. So I do my own fundraising because I never charge. Never, ever, never will. So when they say, okay, here's all the evidence and there's something there, then I find a way to get to that family's house because they're desperate. And that's what I've been doing. And as of today, I performed 33 exorcisms on people who were validly possessed. I do work with psychiatrists, and we do not, under no circumstances would perform an exorcism on someone without having a psychological evaluation first. It's not, it's non-negotiable.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I told you before we came on the air that I do have some skepticism, and it's mostly out of my own growing up in Assemblies of God. It's one of those independent Protestant evangelical denominations, and so I was trained a lot in demonic possession and casting out demons, as it says in the Bible. And I am 100% convinced that we took some people that were suffering from, I would say, mental illness. I don't even like that term. Their brain was doing what was needed to protect them with the tools they had.
That's right.
And we tried to take those tools away from them because it was a psychological issue. And I just repent of that on a daily basis now, being in my own journey, that we did horrible things to people. And they would scream, and we're like, listen to that demon scream, and all of these things. And it was very dramatic, and people would tell these dramatic stories, and I think it was terrible. So I love that you're getting a psychological evaluation on people. And is that sort of how you start to tell the difference between somebody having a psychological inner battle versus somebody having something external that is tormenting them?
Yeah, well, let me say one thing. If any of my priests ever performed an exorcism, one, without permission, and two, without a psychological evaluation, I would defrock them immediately. There would be no negotiation because they know that's unacceptable. So we don't even with the deliverances. So I am really very stern about that, because I find it abominable with many of these people doing this and not having any type of psychological. So look, here's the deal. I am not a psychiatrist, but I do work with people who I respect, who absolutely are convinced that possession exists based on what they have seen, and certainly what I have seen. For example, a person who is, again, mental, you're right. I don't like that mental illness because it's such a stigma on that word. Yeah. But we are all broken in some way, technically broken. In
I don't even like that word either.
Yeah.
We all work in different ways.
Right. We all work in different ways. And so, for example, a person who has, let's say, psychological issues, struggles, however terminology we come with, that doesn't cause them to levitate. A person who's mentally ill does not have languages, knowledge of unknown languages. They don't have prognostication or retrocognition abilities.
Sorry, I have to, not to be that guy, but have you seen people levitating?
I have never seen a levitation as far as 4 feet, but I have seen a person, they were lying here on the back, and here's their torso. They were laying up, and they just went up like a V shape, just like that. The vertebrae was cracking. And I originally I thought, oh my God, they broke their back, because I could hear the snap of the back of the vertebrae. And it was just like someone had put a string and just lifted them straight up.
Wow.
So
okay.
it wasn't.
Sorry to interrupt your story, but I assume some of us out there were like, wait, what? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. And of course, that was a case, obviously, of an exorcism that was required. But so we make sure that the individual is not under any form of psychosis, or, for example, someone who, and this happens a lot, which I really am upset about, but someone who performs an exorcism with someone who had dissociative identity disorder, you can create another identity. And that to me is an abomination. That's terrible. I mean, DID is hard enough as it is to live with DID, let alone now somebody is going, in the name of Jesus, is going to perform this exorcism on this person for $10,000 or $5,000, and then you create another identity. Or if a person is in psychosis, you could create a person go to a manic state. Well, I'm really strict about the protocols with ensuring that the individual, there is no psychological struggles or issues that this person is dealing with. Now, can a person who is mentally ill be possessed? Certainly. Person. Again, I got to watch my.
It's fine.
I'm learning.
Fine. Let's not get too hung up on verbiage. By the way, I have dissociative identity disorder. In a really safe space, some of my parts can present and talk, and sometimes other parts of me remember those discussions and some don't. But it's a brilliant way my brain and my emotional system protected me from the harm of trauma and allowed me to live and move in my daily life. And one of the things we learn so again, I don't think it's a disorder, but it has to be called a disorder for us to get care in the American healthcare system. But the demons that would be cast out of me because of this are the things that are protecting me.
Amen. That's right.
And now I am working with those parts to say, okay, this protection is not helping now. So how can we find a better way to function together? But what's really been fascinating is I've been studying about internal family systems, philosophy of mental care. And in a book came out recently about something's called unattached burdens. And they're finding that there are parts in some of their clients that do not seem to be coming from an internal, but have somehow come from the outside in, and they have amazing stories around it. So
wow.
There's more to, like I say, even though I'm skeptical, there's more to all of this than meets the eye. There just has to be, particularly because there's so much demand for your help. A lot of people are finding things happening that they can't explain.
Well, Pastor Paul, I really I applaud you and your bravery to speak out about this, because there are people that need to hear your story, and that takes a tremendous amount of bravery on your part, because I think there are far more people out there that have DID who feel like they're going to be stigmatized or demonized, and so good for you. Have you been able to integrate any of the identities?
Not totally sure. We think maybe a couple, but still kind of working through that. And,
sure.
There's a fear that people are going to say, oh, well, this is why Paul has been saying bad things about Christianity, because, he's got this illness. But I'm kind of over it. And everybody thinks I'm nuts anyway. So,
I applaud you. That takes a tremendous amount of bravery on your part. It really does. Tremendous amount of bravery.
I think the system's pretty cool, as I've met the parts and find out what they did to save this person as a child. They're so brave and so amazing that I love it. So thank you for that. Yeah.
I think the general public needs a lot more education on struggles like this, because I've had the opportunity, because I do work with psychiatrists, to speak to them about these very, very issues. And I've had to they've had to take me to school several times because of my preconceived ideas. not so much as a mental, again, my terminology of mental illness, and try to
Sure, that's
reshape
fine.
that thought process. But yeah, it's been a good education.
Maybe we just say mental or emotional struggles, or
There we go. There we go. Mental, yeah, struggles.
neurodivergent struggles or
There we
something
go.
like
I
that.
like that.
It's great. So you get a call from somebody, they say, we are experiencing something in our house or something inside a family member, and where does it go from there?
So many times people will tell me, you need to get here now and perform an exorcism. And normally what I do politely, in a very kind way, I tell them, I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. So I dispatch a team out there. And first of all, whatever team that's been there that are seasoned, and these people, and what makes me mad about these ideas that people have about paranormal investigators, is that not everybody thinks everything is a demon, and that not everybody trucks around, the graveyards, and these people put a lot of money into this equipment, and not only that, they never charge. They go to people's homes whom they don't know. They don't owe these people anything. And they could be travel 8 to 10 hours away from their home. They leave their family, they investigate, and it takes hours and hours and hours just to review all the evidence. First of all, you have to investigate.
And
then
they're
you have
not
to turn around.
recording for a TV show, I assume.
And I would absolutely, if anybody went to someone's home and did it for a television show or their YouTube channel, that would be done. I would have no association with them, because because in the 33 exorcisms that I performed, we do record them for legal reasons, but they will never, under any circumstances, ever be showed. I was doing a paranormal conference. I was teaching about demonology, and right in the middle of the conference, a network had contacted me, and so I put it on speakerphone. There's a room full of people. And Bishop Long, yes, Bishop Long, we have a show. It's greenlit, means it's ready to go. It's been approved by the network. All you have to do is go and perform an exorcism on someone on camera, and then we'll pay you X amount. I mean, there's a lot of money. We'll pay you X a lot of money, guaranteed. Even a producer, all this other stuff. I said, so you're telling me all I got to do is perform an exorcism on someone on camera for your network, and I get to make all this money? Absolutely. I tell you what I want you to do. I want you to go, and I want you to get on your knees, and I want you to ask God for forgiveness, because what you did was just an abomination. Never speak to me again. I hung up, and people looked at me like I had 3 heads. Because see, the thing is I'm really strict about never charging. I've had people say, Bishop Long, get to my home, and I'll put a second mortgage on my home. I've had people bawling on the phone, begging, and I'm telling them, I can't get there right now. I've got to raise funds to get to your home. I mean, they're bawling. I've had people take their family out of their home, and they're living in their family's neighborhood, or they're at another apartment or a hotel, because they will not go back in that home because they're that terrified. So when they ask, well, how much do we need? You don't need anything. You just let these teams come in. So the team comes in, they investigate, they gather all the evidence. It takes about 6-7 hours to do that. And then
can you give us a couple of examples of what evidence would be?
Okay, so for like there's an EMF reading, so it's electromagnetic field. So for example, if you have high EMF readings, sometimes that can cause delusions, hallucinations, sickness to the stomach, migraines, and so dizziness. And so that's one thing that they're always looking for. So we do baseline readings first. So before we even begin the investigation, they always do the baseline readings to determine what the EMF reading is. And then after that, all the baseline readings, temperature, everything. Then once all that's been documented, then we begin the investigation. And then if there's any spike in EMF or weather, temperature, anything of this nature, or growling, there's called EVP work. EVP is electronic voice phenomena. So you have a digital recorder, you play it back, you hear a voice, it wasn't supposed to be there, but it's there. I have lots of EVPs that are quite chilling. And then you have what's called a disembodied voice. A disembodied voice is one in which you can actually hear it. So it's recorded, but you can actually hear. So all this, let's say if there's religious artifacts on the wall, you need to document this. Has it been blessed? And then does anything occur to them, or did anything occur to them when in fact the investigation occurred? So there is a form of provocation. Provocation is not beating your chest and saying, come on, demon, I dare you to do something. Because if a demon is there, a demon will looking at you say, oh, I will. I'll do something when you're lonely and you're depressed and your wife or husband leaves you and you lose your job. That's when I'll do something. So you just given an invitation. So when you begin to provoke, you begin to pray. And so they pray, and that's provocation. There's going to be a response. And so we determine what the response is, how violent is it, and then we go from there. And then they review all the evidence, submit it to me, and I make the decision on whether or not we need to go. Now, that's what the minor rite of exorcism. That's when a demonic has infested itself within the home. That's a different story than the solemn rite of exorcism. The solemn rite, you're dealing with someone who is possessed, and that person has gone through extreme physical, mental, spiritual trauma to get to the point of possession. And that's a whole different ballpark altogether.
And I know we're on a podcast and we're in this genre and we're trying to get attention in the world. So I want to be careful of going into sort of exorcism porn with all. I don't know. I like I say, I don't want to make a spectacle out of this, but I guess I'm just interested to know. So when somebody is possessed, what does it look like?
Sure.
How do you know they're possessed, and what makes you say, okay, this is time for a solemn exorcism?
Okay, so with the so you have, let's see, it starts with demonic infestation. So demonic has infested itself within the home. So religious objects are desecrated. You'll hear bangings, smelling of sulfur or rotten flesh. So animals usually are very terrified. You feel a sense of dread, and then it begins with demonic oppression and demonic obsession. So demonic oppression.
Let me ask a broader question.
Yeah.
So what is happening there then? Is there literally a fallen angel?
Yes.
Or a group of fallen angels that have found a mark where they can abide, and they're making their life miserable, or what exactly is the point of that?
There could have been a pre-existing haunting. So let's say, for example, someone does something in their home. They granted the invitation to whatever it might have been, whether it be seances, a Ouija board, whatever it might have been, to grant the invitation. So you could move into a home that has already demonically infested situation. So, but 99% of the time, when that's not the case, it's because someone has invited it in some manner. Whether or not they go out and paranormal investigate, is there anybody here? Can you do something? Can you push me? That's invitation. Then you have attachment, because the demonic has the invitation that it needs to attach. So that's usually 99% of the time. There always has to be some form of invitation.
Okay.
Or pre-existing haunting. So that's we go in, and demonic obsession and demonic oppression is when when it goes up oppression, it begins to attack the person's will. So it begins to bite them and scratch them and pinch them, pulling them out of the bed. It's basically causing such sleep deprivation that the body is becoming compromised. So the will is becoming compromised. And then at the same time, you have demonic obsession, where it begins to interact with them on an intellectual level. So they hear it. It mimics schizophrenia. So they hear these voices, don't let the priest in, the priest is going to harm you, etc., whatever it might be. And that the whole point of that is to destroy the intellect and the will of the person. Because once you do that, then the person can no longer fight. When that has happened, then you have what's called possession. Now, there's perfect possession and transient possession. Transient possession is when the demonic will enter the body and leave at will. A very famous case, a movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, is actually based on a real story. Her name was Anneliese Michel, and she was German. She suffered from transient possession. She always remained in the stage of oppression that never left. So, and the reason being because the demonic wants to keep the intellect and will eradicated so it can enter and leave whenever it wants. Perfect possession is when the person has no relief of the possessed, of the demonic. There's no relief. So when obviously when all the psychological, yep.
Let me catch you for 1 second, just for anybody that's listening. I mean, how afraid should people be? I just want to give reassurance to anybody who might be listening to this and it's creating fear for them.
Sure.
How much should we be afraid that we have a misstep? We played with a Ouija board back in the day. We read a Harry Potter, whatever, from the Satanic Panic, whatever, played the wrong rock music record or something, that a demon has been able to find a spot in us. How how afraid should people be of that? And I'm sorry to interrupt your story, but
No, it's a fair question. So I want to share something with you. Let's see.
okay. Yeah.
So that's 22,000 and 3. That's in my emails for my ministry for people who are needing an exorcism or claiming they need an exorcism. In
Wow.
25 years, I performed 33.
Okay.
So this is really, truly very, very rare. It does occur, but it is not as prevalent as so many people think. So I think people need to. The reason is I teach this is because I understand about being skeptical. I'm skeptical. If I believed every single person who told me that they had a demon in their home, if I had a nickel for every time someone, I'd be a millionaire. So many people have told me this.
700,000 followers on TikTok. There's obviously some interest.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. I mean, well, when I'm a cast member on a show called Eli Roth Presents Legion of Exorcists. So it's on HBO Max and Travel Channel. And boy, when we did that, because we were sharing our stories about our cases that we worked, I mean, I was slammed with people. Oh, I had the same situation happen to me. This is why I rely on paranormal investigators to debunk. Our goal is to debunk. That's what we want to do. And it's only when, after we exhausted every single possible thing, then we say, okay, now we got to look at the theological aspects. Because I tell them debunk. That's what I want you to do. Because I'm a skeptic, but at the same time, I can't deny what I've seen. And so for me, it's not a matter of I think possession exists. It is a matter I know. Because here's why I tell people, number one, I receive no stipend or paycheck for being clergy. We've established that. I don't charge for this ministry. I pay for it out of my own pocket. As a matter of fact, for 15 years, I actually put $15,000 on my credit card, helping people for free. And it was just recently that I've had a few friends say, hey, we're to step up and help you. Thank God. Otherwise, I would have had to stop. So I don't charge. I don't do this for fame, because you do things for fame to make money. I receive no stipend.
Yeah.
If I did not know that possession exists, I would do something else with my time.
Mm.
Because
let me jump in. I'm sorry, because our time is short, and I know you have a hard stop. So we, suggest talk to your clergy, talk to a therapist if you're feeling that, and kind of start there. And then if it goes on, talk to Bishop Long. But so now get us back to if your investigators have done their investigation, there's something going on. Okay. We're seeing I say demons harassing a family and maybe some possession of a person. How do you get it out of there? I don't know if that's the right language, and I apologize if that's
expel it. So, for example, if demonic has infested itself within the home and it's scaring the family, it's attacking the people. So you go in, and once all the evidence is there, you hear the EVPs. It's clearly something malevolent is there. I would go in and perform what's called the minor rite of exorcism. So basically, I start in one particular room. I bless the whole entire ground. And I finish with the room that is the most active. So the family usually is not there, because I don't want anyone to get harmed, because it has happened before. So I'm in there. Activity usually sometimes can be violent, can be very aggressive. And then there's an expulsion. And the way you know it is everything
violent, like they knock you down, they fight with you, they throw things at what's violent.
I've had a crucifix thrown at me. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget this. So this guy asked me to come into his home and help him. And sure, no problem. Beautiful home. It was a 2-story home. And we were upstairs. So we were walking upstairs, and he said, I'm just feeling overwhelmed right now. He had a beautiful mahogany couch. So you have the living room here. And then over here, you had kind of like a small dining room. We were up there. As soon as I was beginning the litany of saints upstairs, it was like I heard one of the loudest noises. I thought the house was going to fall in, because I had no idea. It's like someone had just knocked the house down. We ran down the stairs. This massive mahogany, big, huge couch had been flown from where it was in the living room and completely crashed into his table, the dining table, and destroyed the hole in the wall. I mean, I have never seen that type of reaction in my life.
Is that just like they're pissed that you're there and that's their response, or
that's provocation? Because once you begin provoking, you're going to get a response. And that was the most violent response I have ever seen in my life. There
Mhm.
was no way. First of all, there's no one down there. But secondly, there's no way, even 2 men, 3, you would have to have a team of 20 men to be able to even lift that and throw it.
So what does blessing look like to make it so they have to leave and can't come back?
Yeah, well, you have to certainly consecrate the ground, and you bless the home, and then we have mass and the home, and of course every person is then blessed. And so it's a form of just basically just consecrating the ground and the area to expel. So that's what we do with a minor rite of exorcism. The demon has infested. On the solemn rite, I have someone who is medically trained with me because I'm not. So I don't know if the person is going into a heart attack or stroke during an exorcism, because that's possible, because the body has already gone through so much trauma. So we have to make sure we're monitoring the vitals. Usually it's very calm in the beginning. And as I begin the litany of saints, that is when the activity will increase. Sometimes it can get quite violent. The temperature usually drops dramatically. This is why there's a term called retrocognition. And retrocognition is the ability to know your sins. So this is why we always have the sacrament of reconciliation, everybody, prior to participating in the exorcism, because we take that away from the demonic, because the demonic will use that to embarrass whoever is in the room to stop the rite.
Mm.
And also prognostication, to be able to tell the future, or something of this nature.
So they'll start listing out sins of the person
do.
promoting the exorcism and they know what they're talking about.
They absolutely do. Yeah, 100%. This retrocognition is something that's really important. That's why everybody, no matter who is going to be there, even the person who is the assistant, the medical assistant, everyone has to have the sacrament of reconciliation, because we have to absolve, to remove that from, because I've seen cases where some pretty bad things were divulged and it just destroyed the entire rite. So the rite is a repetitive prayer. There are 2 things that I command from the demon. There's no such thing as having a conversation in an exorcism. It doesn't exist. 2 things. What is your name? And what is the hour of departure? That's it. Because actually in the rite, you have to silence the voice. And that, because otherwise it lies. And it will throw the voice. And what I mean by that is very disorienting. So if you've ever gone to YouTube, and there's an 8D, put on the headsets, and like 8D surround sound. And so it will throw the voice where you'll hear it over here and back here and back, primarily to disorient you. And so in the rite, you have to silence the voice and command 2 things from it.
Name and serial
Name,
number.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cool.
so and so what happens? The exorcism is successful. What happens? Do you see apparitions leave? Do they?
No.
What happens?
There is a definite change in the atmosphere. It's very light. When you walk into a person that is possessed, it is heavy. It feels heavy. The presence is it is so like a 50-pound weight on your chest. You feel it. It is intense. And then at the expulsion stage, that completely lifts. I mean, and the solemn rite it's repetitive. It's a repetitive prayer. That's what it is. There's no conversation. I don't care what it says. I don't care what it says. It is repetitive, because the intellect and will of the exorcist and the intellect and will of the demonic are at battle. One will win, one will lose. And that's why we always have an assistant. So, because it's exhausting. I mean, this could, last quite some time. So many times it's not a one and done situation. Sometimes it has to be repetitive. But you keep going and you keep pushing and you keep repeating the prayer over and over until eventually you weaken it. And then there's the expulsion stage. The entire room, everything, the oppression lifts. Everybody can feel it. And the person receives the Blessed Sacrament. I bless the person. There is no violent reaction to this. And then we usually immediately administer some type of first aid and get them to the hospital so they can get a lot of liquids into the body, because at that point in time, regurgitation does happen. So the movie The Exorcist, that happens quite often. So they can dehydrate very easily. So we got to get them liquids.
We've all felt that thing when we walk into a room and we're like, ooh, something feels strange in there.
But it's a different. Here's when you walk into a place, to a location where someone is possessed. The only way I can describe it is, that you're dealing with something that's very, very old and pure evil. I mean, there's no guessing about it. I mean, you're in the presence, and you got to be careful, because sometimes doubt can creep in, meaning that, oh, there's somebody more holier than I that can deal with this. Someone who's more intelligent, someone who's more advanced, there's always someone else. Well, no, you're it. You're there, so you got to take care of it. There was the first case was like that. I was the assistant. I wasn't the primary, so I was the assistant, and I lifted the eyelids. I'll never forget this. I had always read that the eyes will go black. You can see this everything go complete black. So I've always read it. I'm like, okay. So I remember the person was laying there. I lifted the eyelids to see where they were in the possession, at the stage. The eyes were solid black, and I couldn't move. I could not move. I was completely catatonic. I could actually see my reflection in the eyes. So I couldn't talk. I was completely paralyzed. And thank God, I was not the primary at that time, because I would have been in trouble. So the primary took me, blessed me, and we continued the rite. But that was the most frightening experience I've ever had, ever, doing an exorcism, ever, because I never felt that vulnerable. That was a terrible feeling.
So when you watch movies of demonic possession, what do you? Some more accurate than others. I remember Amityville Horror, or there was one where a demon was like molesting a woman that I know is based loosely on a true story, I guess, in Southern California. But yeah, how accurate do you see some of those movies?
I very rarely watch the movies because they irritate me, because they're so bad. But I was good friends with Lorraine Warren. Lorraine Warren was part of the Warrens, her and Ed. I did not know Ed, but I did know Lorraine. And I talked to her quite often about, the Amityville case. And I talked to her about The Conjuring. I actually know Andrea Perrin. Andrea Perrin is a very good friend of mine. She actually grew up in the Conjuring house. And so many times the movies are so terrible. It's like, I can't. I've got to leave, because they're just so bad. But there are movies, for example, Nefarious. Nefarious is right on. Right on. The movie The Rite, with Anthony Hopkins, as close as you're going to get. It's based on Father Gary Thomas's life. I had the opportunity to speak to him several times. He is a Roman Catholic priest. The Rite is absolutely brilliant. That is very accurate, and Nefarious is as well.
I had heard that The Exorcist movie was a response. Maybe even the Catholic Church had some interest in it, to Rosemary's Baby. Is that? Have you heard that before? That the Catholic Church felt Rosemary's Baby made the good side look too weak or powerless, or something like that.
Yeah, well, I've heard that. The Exorcist. It's interesting, because I was actually at the Exorcist house at one time in 2015 in St. Louis. There was a couple that moved in there. And she was pregnant, and she did not want to bring a child into that house unless it was blessed. And she was like, no, I'm not doing it. It ain't going to happen. So they contacted me, and I was on the Travel Channel show, and it was intense. That place was heavy. It was very heavy. But now The Exorcist, of course, is based on Roland Doe, is synonym name. It's not his real name, but it's based on his life. And it all started because he was very loyal and he loved his aunt. And but she was a spiritualist. She was very heavy into seance and to Ouija boards. And so he, when she passed away, he tried to contact her via Ouija board. But based on what I've seen on all the files, the Exorcist files, because I was on a documentary with the Booth brothers on the Exorcist, so I got to see the actual diary of the priest, of the Exorcist who performed it. And there's no question in my mind, based on what I saw, he was possessed. No question at all.
So is there a way to talk to somebody who has passed on, or is that always going to be a demon impersonating that person?
I tell people stay away from Ouija boards. Just stay away from them. Here's the problem: you don't know who you're speaking with, and that's the invitation. And you got to remember that's a form of possession. People, when you're moving the planchet, you're giving whatever spirit that is there to control your body, to move the planchet. Now, many times people are doing it themselves, but there have been cases where I have seen where it was not the people. And that's really, really dangerous. It's a form of invitation and a form of possession. So I always tell people, look, I believe that our loved ones can send us messages. I know for a fact they can. In all 33 exorcisms I performed, when I was in the seminary, my Aunt Mary passed away. And the last words for her to me was, Jamie, get here. Get here. Because but she also told me, whenever you smell roses, I'm there. In every single 33 exorcism, right before I do the litany of saints, I smell roses. It's over the whole entire house smells like roses. And my mom passed away in 2014 with a brain tumor. And so she had an operation. She struggled with that, but she loved butterflies. And I remember walking around the park, and this butterfly, and it was not butterfly season. I mean, it was cold. And this butterfly kept flying around because I was thinking about her, I was hoping she's okay. This butterfly kept flying around me. It's like, well, this is kind of strange. And so I got to my car and it stopped right on my car. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I said, well, okay, Mom, if that's you, follow me. Walked, started following me. So went right back to the car, it did it again. So I'm convinced that our loved ones can send us messages. I'm okay. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm okay. And that's all okay with me.
Gosh, I'm going to have you back because I have about 100 more questions. But I'm so interested, the story of the Gadarene demoniac in the Christian New Testament. And we see this interaction with Jesus and these demons, and there's 1,000 of them perhaps. And they say, don't send us to the abyss, send us into those pigs. Okay, WTF? What's happening there? And what is the abyss, and what happens when they go in the pigs, and what happens when the pigs run off the cliff and die?
What's interesting from a cultural perspective, we understand that pigs were seen as unclean animals, filthy animals. So they would rather be thrown into filthy pigs. And at that time, people would have thought, oh, that's the most disgusting thing in the world, versus being thrown into the pit. So the pit must be far more terrible than being thrown in a swine. And Jesus allowed that because their time for eternal damnation had not come yet. But there will.
So he wasn't having mercy on them. He had some eternal insight or something. You think?
There was absolutely no. I don't think he was showing mercy at all. He was saying, your time, I have control over you to where I can do this. So, but just understand your time is coming. And that's one thing people always ask me, can you pray for a demon and change their mind? No, they were in the very presence of God and still freely reject him. And somehow we think that we're going to be able to do something that God couldn't to convince them. Oh, come on, God ain't so bad. No, you can't do that. So
is there a possibility that as we learn more about quantum physics, I was a pastor in this prophetic environment where we would have prophets come, and I've seen some things, man. Now we know a lot of them were data mining off of social media and things, and learning things about people before they came in. But some of them I have seen as I was at a restaurant and they're talking to a waitress and they couldn't have possibly known they were going to meet this person beforehand. Is there some chance that some of this is just a quantum connection between human beings, between us and human beings in another dimension? Could quantum physics explain Jesus walking through a wall? Is there any part of that in all of this, you think?
Well, because I've been in the paranormal community for so long, I met some pretty amazing people who are, no question, psychics, no question, are mediums, and no one will convince me otherwise. Now, I'm very good friends with Chip Coffey. He is brilliant. But I think there's also people who are really good at cold reading. And I've met people that could tell you everything about your past just by looking at you, watching you, observing you. And it's like, how in the world? Because they are brilliant observers. Brilliant. I mean, they look at your body, there's a scar.
So it's not metaphysical.
I don't think so. But I think some are. For
Yeah.
example, I was a chaplain for a major metropolitan police department. And so we went down to a case, and they wanted me to be down where the family, so the family wouldn't run on the crime scene and mess up any type of evidence. So I was there with the family. They got a tip from a medium where it was a missing persons. And the medium told them where they could find this body. I was skeptical. I was prepared actually to tell the family, it's okay. I'm sorry they didn't find you. I had already planned. Okay, wait, this is exactly what you're going to say. You know, I'd already planned it. And then the police said, we found something. What do you mean you found something? You're messing my whole entire. Well, I was stunned. So they found the body within 5 feet of where this medium told this family where they could find the remains. People say, well, that's demonic. Demons take away your peace. They don't give you peace. That gave this family peace of mind. And interesting enough, this family was very anti-psychic medium prior to this. I mean, really. But when it affected them and it benefited them, then their whole perspective changed, completely changed. I saw it. I was there. I witnessed it. I can't explain it.
I met a guy once who could tell you your social security number when he first met you, you know, those kind of things. It was crazy. And all of those can be con artist parlor tricks, right? But we were at my church office, and he went to the restroom, and one of our parishioners came in, they had just been driving by, and they dropped in, and there were 2 other people there, a guy named Michael and a guy named Thomas. And this parishioner said, "Oh, Michael Thomas, that's my son's name, Michael Thomas." And she was laughing about it. Well, this guy then comes back from the bathroom into my office, and he says, like, this probably isn't the name, I don't remember, but he says, like, David Arthur. And she's just standing there. All of a sudden she goes, "That's my other son's name, David Arthur." And so I don't know. I've seen those things, and it's pretty wild and crazy. I want to show you a video to end on a little something humorous, perhaps, or maybe you'll tell me it's real. But in Fresno, we have our own claim to fame in the ghost hunting world, and it's called the Fresno Nightcrawler. And so I want you to tell me. Oh, you know of the Fresno Nightcrawler?
Very familiar with it. Yes.
Okay. Well, tell me what this is all about for somebody that hasn't seen it before.
Living in Fresno, California, checked their backyard security camera and allegedly discovered this.
Oh yeah, that's been debunked.
It's just going for a stroll.
No, don't tell me that.
I'm sorry. That video has been debunked. It was a group of individuals that put that together because they had actually a string and they were pushing it. So yeah, it's been debunked. So
I mean, that creature couldn't even walk. I mean, yeah, like what would happen if it fell over? It would have
exactly. But I tell you what, now, speaking of, there are some really interesting, like when you're talking about cryptozoology. Now, I'm telling you, that's another story altogether. But I am 100% a believer that there is some type of Bigfoot out there. I interviewed a game warden from Alaska. And he was on my show, and I would ask him, and I said, well, because he swore he saw Bigfoot. I said, well, look, maybe you saw a bear or a moose. And he said, Bishop Long, let me tell you something. I'm a native of Alaskan. I'm a game warden. If I can't tell the difference between a bear and a moose and a bipedal creature, I shouldn't be a game warden in Alaska. And he's not selling a book. He doesn't do televisions. He's absolutely convinced that he saw something. And I believe him.
Yeah, I'm certain there are creatures that exist in the world that we don't know for sure. So, well, this has been so interesting, Bishop Long. I appreciate you gave me a nice word on social media, so we were able to connect, and I hope we can do this again sometime.
I would love to do that. Yes. Well, let's definitely do it.
You gave me a lot to think about.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
In the